Welcome to part 2 of building the VU LED cube. Now that we've built the grids, the next step is soldering the grids to the motherboard. First, we need to remove the sockets from the plastic strip. I use some sprung shears to do the job. If you clip slightly in front of the socket is exposed and you can easily prise it out of the strip. The next job is bending the positive legs backwards. When you assemble a cube, they'll meet the row behind. I'm using a pair of needle nose pliers and bending at the solder joint. When you've bent the positive leg back on all of the grids, we need to mount the sockets. I put the sockets on the end of the legs and mounted them to the board, but if I was doing the project again, I'd solder the sockets into the board first and then insert the grids into the sockets. As you can see, inserting the grids this way is a little tricky. It's very important that the LED grids are mounted with the LEDs in the same orientation as the black buttons. The pads on the board are quite small, so it's important to make sure you have enough solder on the joint. A couple of mine came loose after I'd finished the project and I needed to resolder them. Once the first grid is soldered, it's time to install the second grid and solder the positive legs to the grid behind. And then you follow the same process for the rest of the grids. When the grids are all in place, I snip the positive legs from the back row. As you can see, the grids aren't straight at this point. You can short the grids along the positives, so I'll be adding supporting connectors between the grids to pull them square. So that's all of the grids in place and soldered to each other. Now it's time to install the control wires to the layers. First, I'm going to install the sockets, which are located to the right hand side of the grid. The socket pads are very close to the grid sockets, so it's quite a delicate soldering job. The next step is to cut the wires and solder them to the sockets in corresponding rows. The back socket is number 1 and it's connected to the bottom layer on one of the positive LED legs. Socket 2 is connected to the second layer, and so on until you have all 8 layers connected. As I connected each of the control wires, I tested the cube to make sure that all the connections were working. As you can see, all of the control wires are soldered and tested, so it's time to install the supports between the grids. For this, I'm using the legs for some LEDs I have left over from another project. I cut 7 legs to the length of 2 cm. It's quite tricky soldering the supports, so I soldered them slightly offset to each other. And there it is, the finished cube, and it's far more solid with the supports between the grids. Unfortunately, I forgot to install the legs before I soldered the grids to the board, so I had to insert them later. It's a bit of a faff, but it's easy enough. Now the cube's complete, it's time to plug it in and test it. When you turn the cube on, it runs through a test pattern until you press one of the function buttons. The test patterns make it easy to tell if you have any solder joints which aren't properly made or any faulty LEDs. Thanks for watching and good luck with your build.